Today we're discussing the invasion of the Midwest. If you give me a couple of seconds, I'll quickly change the image we have here so that it looks more like what we're discussing. Give me a second on TikTok now, on YouTube. Mambo. All right, we're back. Please don't stop tapping, don't stop sharing. If you're on Twitter, thank you for joining us. So yesterday we had the very first full session on Twitter. We started at 1, like we always do. And we were here until past 8 yesterday. Hello? All right, so I hope the sound is good on Twitter. So we had the first full session on Twitter yesterday, and it was quite good. Had a great time. We're here till past 8 p.m. and we're able to cover a lot of grounds, and we'll see how we're going to be able to replicate that today. So let me change this image because we're going to start with the invasion of the Midwest, because essentially that's what today's session is about. We'll talk about other things. We're going to start with this video, the forgotten invasion when Biafra hit Midwest, but we still have Republic of Benin, how Midwest Igbos helped Biafra invade, the Midwest move that exposed Ojuku's game, the other side of Biafra, and what Biafra did to the indigenes of Cross River, Akwa Ibom, Rivers, and Bayelsa states. And yeah, so again, there's something wrong with my audio. All right, I think I fixed it. So today is the 58th, not today, it was 9th, actually a couple of days ago, was the 50th anniversary of Biafra. And one of the issues I think we have in Nigeria's history is a one-sided perspective of it. Like there's a one way of looking at things, and if you don't see it from that way, you're tagged a bigot, a tribalist. You're insulted. You're called all kinds of things because you're supposed to move on with that narrative. Essentially, what's called a single story. But that's not what we're doing. We're looking at things. We've heard a lot from the other side. Thank you very much for the feedback, Zaza. Thank you. We've heard a lot from one side over the years. Like we're not done with it. Like we've not heard the last of it from one side. And it's okay to tell their story. It's just that the sad part is that more often than not, their version is not usually true, which is the sad part, to be honest. But whilst it's okay for them to say what they want to say, hopefully at some point they make it the truth. But regardless of what they say, we want to make sure that we also listen to the other side so that we don't have a one-sided narrative of the events of the day. All right. Having said that, let me do a little announcement before we start playing. So again, we do have the sessions every weekday, Mondays to Fridays, 1 p.m. Ife time, West African time. But then on Tuesdays, I don't usually come on camera because it's not a full session, We play recordings of stuff we've done in the past that will help us, understand Nigeria's history a bit more. And also, we don't usually do news today. I love the news section, but so we just focus on the topic and just do that alone. All right. Okay. So if you're on TikTok, before we get into this, please let's keep tapping. If you're not a member of the team, please click on the heart icon right beside Busui Oris, the name up there, and join the team. If you're a member, please click on the icon and drop a gift, drop a heart me. We want to get this on the FYP. Like I said, we're going to be starting early, so I think we did it. We're doing well right now. You know, actually, I forgot that you guys can't see me. All right, so let's start with Mambo. Excuse me. Let's start with a short, just something short while I sort this thing out. There's a short video here. That's why I lost the main stuff. We have a number of videos to get through today, by the way, about 4 or 5, but they're not all long. Some are like 20 minutes, some are shorter. So by the time we put this together, I have it to be 1 hour. And then much later, I'll bring people up so we can be part of the conversation. All right, thank you very much for being here. So let's have this. So we're going to start with this first one. By the way, the videos I'm playing are all on YouTube. Busui Oris YouTube channel. You find all these videos there. So we're going to start with examining the Biafran invasion of the Midwest and the role ethnicity played. It's very short. Then after that, we'll get into the movie. We'll get to the video that you have displayed here, the forgotten invasion when Biafra hit the Midwest. So let's start with this one. Take a listen. So there was an invasion of the Midwest. We all know that. We talked about it yesterday. But let me continue reading from the book again. Is called, in case you are interested, instead of insulting me, the book is called Midwest States Non-Igbo Minorities. These are non-Igbo minorities speaking. In other words, they are not Igbo, but they are minorities of the Midwest. Maybe I should be, let me say in pidgin. These people, they not be Igbo, but then be Midwest. So minorities will be people like Urobo, Isoko, Ijo, all those Isheki, all those groups in the Midwest. They have an experience, or they experience certain things during the Biafran War. This is their account. This is not about you. It's about what people from your place did to them. And if you don't want to hear it, you will hear it. True talk. Okay, thank you for being here. The book again is Midwest State Non-Igbo Minorities Responses to the Biafran Occupation and Federal Liberation in the Nigerian Civil War, 1967 to 1970. Only with the Civil War, 1967 to 1970, did violent conflicts with the Igbo occur in the Midwest states. This followed the invasion and occupation by the secessionist Biafran army of the Midwest region for some weeks under the guise of liberating Midwest from the northern Nigerian military junta domination. Biafran secessionists later declared I think I read this earlier. They later declared the Midwest region the new Republic of Benin. But the predominantly non-Igbo minority ethnic groups that make up the Midwest celebrated neither the liberation nor the new republic. The author is Uyilawa. I don't know if I'm getting the tone correctly, but it's Uyilawa. That's Uyi, like Benin Uyi. Lawa. Uswan Lele. That's his name. So, all right, that's the short. We're going to get into the main video now. So this one is titled The Forgotten Invasion When Biafra Hit the Midwest. Please, if you're on TikTok, if you're on YouTube, please like the live, share the live. You know, let's keep the live going. Thank you very much. So take a listen to this.
I borrowed 300,000 naira. I need to pay back 380,000.
Gave the invading troops a jubilant welcome. I'm reading Minority Rights and the National Question in Nigeria by Uyilawa Oswanlele. Who is he? He's a professor of history in New York. It says the Biafran invasion of the Midwest, which was led by Colonel Victor Banjo and Lieutenant Colonel Fola Oyewole, both Yoruba, and other Igbo military officers, was virtually without incident and welcomed in the Midwest areas. In his study of the Biafran War, Michael Gold claims that Banjo took Benin without the loss of a single life. Indeed, the inhabitants gave the invading troops a jubilant welcome. But that's not the only way the Midwest was invaded. That account is true, but it's not the entire truth. There's another side to it. That other side is bad. Let me read it now. Since this claim of Biafran occupation is not true for all areas of the Midwest and its people, as it caught the non-Igbo areas unawares and was achieved through sporadic fighting and violence. An Irish priest reported the violence that was perpetrated by the Biafran soldiers who took Benin. The leper settlement in Osiomo had about 1,200 residents before the war. Divided by the Osiomo River, the Igbos lived on the east bank, and Beninese Yorubas and others on the west bank. When Biafrans invaded in August, they swept through the Igbo side and, crossing the river to the west side, killed all the Beninese and Yorubas they could find. 6 weeks later, the Federals came from the other direction, set up their artillery on the Benin side and shelled the Igbo side, after which they crossed the river and killed any Igbos remaining. If there's any lesson, there are many lessons, sir, but if there's any lesson you should learn from all of this thing we're discussing, if you don't, before you throw the first punch, always measure if you can take it back when people give it back to you.
Virtually all the newspapers, including Nnamdi Azikiwe's Igbo West African pilot,
virtually all the newspapers, including Nnamdi Azikiwe's Igbo West African pilot,
reported fighting in some towns in the Midwest during the invasion.
So including his own West African pilot, reported fighting in some towns in the Midwest during the invasion. The Biafran capture of Benin City, the capture of the Midwest state, was not without resistance and violence. West African magazine described it as the mutiny of the Midwest Military Area Command, which involves with the intention of capturing or killing him.
While the massacres of Northerners by Biafrans were recorded in Benin City, on Sapele, and missed rioting in Igbo areas. The number of deaths from this first day of invasion and occupation is not known. The major victims of this fight were officers of the police force, which was reported to have lost many men during the occupation.
The major victims of this fight were officers of the police force, which was reported to have lost many men during the occupation. Since the over 250 policemen of Eastern Nigerian origin in the Midwest were redeployed to Biafra in May 1967, it is safe to assume that the majority of those killed were non-Igbo officers. The entry of Biafran troops into Midwestern towns and villages was characterized by search for and torture and killings of suspected northern Nigerians. They find them, go reach Midwest. Let's continue slowly. We'll take that again. The entry of Biafran troops into Midwestern towns and villages was characterized by search for and torture and killings of suspected northern Nigerians, conscription of soldiers, and the seizure and looting of food, livestock, vehicles, machinery, money, and any item that caught their fancy, as well as raping of women. Eyewitness accounts and newspapers reported that the Biafrans targeted the outer quarters of most towns. Igbo residents pointed out the residence of northern Nigerians in addition to searching the houses of Midwesterners suspected of hiding northern Nigerians. In Benin City, many resident northern Nigerians were loaded into trucks and taken out of the city by the Biafran soldiers, and it is not clear what happened to them. Some personal accounts provide clues as to the fate of these residents. 65-year-old Labo Shokoto, a northern Nigerian, claimed that he was shot in the chest and dumped in the bush, but helped by local people to later escape to the north. The northern Nigerian government newspaper New Nigeria reported various atrocities allegedly committed against northern Nigerians in the Midwest. Was this one of the reasons Murtala Mohammed just went crazy when he got to Asaba? Was it? Some Ẹkáàbọ people and Igbo-speaking people confirmed that they helped to hide and protect non-Igbos, which included northern Nigerians, from being killed by Biafran soldiers. The atrocities were also extended to all non-Igbo groups who showed signs of hostility from the moment of occupation. Guys, this is not Biafra. If it happens in Biafra, it's bad enough, but this is happening in the Midwest. The fighting and violence that characterized the invasion and occupation frightened many non-Igbo people and foreigners into fleeing the major towns without their valuable properties. These properties became the immediate target of the Biafran soldiers and their civilian Igbo and non-Igbo accomplices. The West African Pilot newspaper reported that Biafrans confiscated foodstuff and other commodities, which were immediately taken to Biafra. Oyewole, who led one of the columns of invading Biafran soldiers, corroborated newspaper reports on how the Biafran army treated properties in the Midwest. Who is Oyewole? The one I mentioned earlier, Lieutenant Colonel Fola Oyewole. It says troops of the Liberation Army. What's Liberation Army? I'll go into details later, but let me just put it this way. Victor Banjo took over the 101st Brigade. Victor Banjo, for instance, at the beginning was actually in charge of the militia in Biafra, and then later decided to form his own brigade. When he formed the brigade, he named that brigade Liberation Army of Nigeria, even though it was a brigade in Biafran Army. Even when Ojukwu wrote a letter to him, he recognized that army, or that brigade, or that army as Liberation Army. And so whenever you see Liberation Army here, so Fola Iwole will call it Liberation Army, just like Victor Banjo would, because as far as they were concerned, they are trying to liberate other people of Nigeria from northern domination. So the idea is we are going to liberate people. We liberate the Midwest, we liberate the West, we liberate this, we liberate that, and they will take everybody away from, under the stranglehold of the North. Let me say something to Yoruba people. When they use North and say Fulani is your problem, North is your problem, I'm not saying the North is a saint. I'm not saying they don't have any problem, but I'm saying that don't for 1 second assume that the person pointing at the North is not trying to distract you from himself. It's as much a problem as the person is pointing at. Just Ojulala Confin Shori. Anyway, so we're back to this. So this is what Oyewole said about how they got into the middle. So let me read from the beginning. Oyewole, who led one of the columns of invading Biafran soldiers, corroborated newspaper reports on how the Biafran army treated properties in the Midwest. This is what he says. Troops of the Liberation Army did not behave in a manner likely to improve their relationship with the people of the areas they occupied. The worst hit towns were Warri, Benin, and Sapele. Men of 18th Battalion based in Warri were notorious, looting anything they could turn into cash. Abandoned commercial houses were indiscriminately broken into and emptied by looters. Nothing was considered too big to be removed. Vehicles, bag of salt, and provisions of all sorts were favored commodities. Some of the things were either sold on the spot at giveaway prices or sent to Biafra to be sold later. It was not difficult to find ready markets in the Midwest, with thousands of Biafrans streaming into the liberated state to do business. It was not an uncommon occurrence to see a soldier in Warri dash another one the sum of 50 or even 100 pounds. Most of the beneficiaries were those who visited either from Biafra or some other operational areas within the Midwest, where there were no opportunity for looting. Where was this happening? In the Midwest. Were there soldiers fighting them at this point? At this point, the real fight never started though. He went further to report all the cars that were abandoned in Warri, including those of people, mostly expatriates, who had left Warri by boat, disappeared fast, though the cars were disappearing. The easiest excuse for stealing a car was to claim that the car was required at Enugu. He also observed, quote, the few who manned checkpoints when they existed used the opportunity to terrorize and extort money from innocent civilians. Biafran soldiers also engaged in outright seizure and confiscation of motor vehicles from their was that they were for military operations and were never seen again. The owners who resisted such seizures were killed. Benson Ibude, the son of one of the victims, alleged that his 39-year-old father was dragged out of his vehicle in Ugo by Biafran soldiers and killed. Though Oyewole did not report the killings by Biafrans, he noted their indiscriminate shooting at the slightest provocation. Numerous deaths occurred from such incidents which were common under occupation. Defiance, resistance, and sabotage took various forms in various parts of the non-Igbo areas, while the Biafran soldiers and collaborators detained and killed arrested resistors. This is confirmed by James Akpenino, a teenager during the occupation, who stated, quote, outright molestation, harassment, and killings of non-Igbo civilians became a common feature on a daily basis. In fact, the Biafran occupation was a nightmare of brutal excesses from Biafran soldiers on non-Igbo speaking indigenous people of the state. At night, suspected saboteurs were fished out of their homes, arrested, and oftentimes summarily executed. Do I believe this? Absolutely. Why? The same thing happened in Rivers State. Where do you find it? You know the book. I always mention that book. Sunset in Biafra by Lechi Amadi. The exact same thing happened. It gets worse, by the way. Senior non-Igbo civil servants such as Imokwede, Secretary to Government, Joseph Adeola, the Commissioner of Police, Olu Akpata, a Permanent Secretary, and Samuel Uweni, engineer at Nigerian Broadcasting Corporation, were arrested, taken to Biafra, and detained till the end of the war. Remember that Anthony Nauro mentioned this, that civilians were taken from the Midwest to Biafra and detained. That's the same thing. It's just here, he's just mentioning their names. Imokwede was the Secretary to the Government, Joseph Adeola, the Commissioner of Police, Olu Akpata, Permanent Secretary, and Samuel Wen.
Bluetooth mode. Welcome to Banjo. Line in. Engineered Nigerian Broadcasting Corporation. All of them were taken. What was this happening in the Midwest? What was Midwest today? Just in
Engineered Nigerian Broadcasting Corporation. All of them were taken. Where was this happening in the Midwest? What was Midwest today? Just in case, just to give us an idea. Midwest is presently Edo State and Delta State. So imagine crossing River Niger, going to Delta State, going to Ugeli, Sapele, Warri, going all the way to Benin, and just doing whatever you like. By the way, somebody will say, what's the role of the Yoruba amongst these people? One of them was one who reported what happened. I'm going to read something to you from this book, just to tell you how it went down. People were killed, unalived in Benin, in Sapele, in Ugeli, in Warri, all over the place, right? The bank was looted. But then you say, oh, but wait, Victor Banjo was involved. Yes, he was. Let's read something to you from this book. This book is called Colonel Victor Banjo, Revolutionary Betrayed. But let me just read from the beginning. It says here, whereas when Banjo captured Benin, he treated the bank, that's the Central Bank of Nigeria, he treated the bank as a sacred institution and did not allow his troops or anyone to touch the place. There was heavy pressure from Ojukwu asking Banjo to break into the bank and loot it. But Banjo refused to become a dishonorable person. His discipline on the issue of money stands to his credit today. One of the reasons why Ojukwu earmarked him for death was that he refused his order to loot the Central Bank of Benin and bring the money to Biafra. It was a big lie for anyone to suggest that Banjo took money from the federal side to sabotage Biafra, or that he allowed the federal side to take the Midwest. A man who had the whole central bank of Benin under him and did not take a dime from it certainly could not be bought by anyone. Major Adewale Ademoyega testified to the integrity of Banjo. He recalled that when Banjo entered the Midwest, he had with him the sum of £5,000, and when he was recalled by Ojukwu to Enugu, he handed the remaining balance of £4,500 to him for the continuation of the war. This indeed showed that Banjo had no intention of supplanting Ojukwu at all. Otherwise, he would have kept the money for the next operation, and he would have recruited Ademoyega, a fellow Yoruba man, and his assistants to execute the plan with him. Was Central Bank in Benin looted? Yes. What was Victor Banjo's role in the looting? That's what I just read. He refused to loot the bank. But Ojukwu still got his boys to do it. By the way, that was not the only bank that was looted in the war. There were 3 banks that Ojukwu's boys looted. Central Bank in Benin, Central Bank of Nigeria in Port Harcourt, and Central Bank of Nigeria in Calabar. How do I know this? Read the interview that Chief Obafemi Awolowo granted in 1983 at Abeokuta. And to be clear, if you are from Edo State or you are from Delta State and you hear that the person will say he wants your own country after River Niger, waiting carry and come my side, say they want to liberate me, create region. By the way, we'll get to Isha. Even the liberation nonsense that they said they were doing, it was a way to take over the entire space. Let's continue. The Biafran invasion of the Midwest was also regarded as an Igbo affair. Let me stop and say something because I need to say it because people may not get it. When people talk about the coup being Igbo coup or this invasion being Igbo invasion, please, if you are Igbo, resist the urge to be crying and to be throwing tantrums and saying, stop it, you are tribalistic, stop it. It is disrespect for the people to do what they did then in the name of the ethnic group, and for you, younger generation, to come up and tell people to saying it. It's like you want to win on all sides. You want to win the physical battle of destroying people's homes and lives, and then you also want to win the battle of narratives by saying that nobody must mention what was done. It's painful. And I'm not talking about this offensive. For you, it may be offensive because you can get offended by anything. It's insensitive. It's a stupid thing to do. And I know people do it every time you speak. They say, "Why are you saying it's tribalistic?" It's not tribalistic. For instance, the counter coup of July 1966 is called the Northern Counter Coup. I don't see anybody from the North calling me a tribalist for saying that, because that's what it was.
Food is ready.
All right, this is from The Tragedy of Victory by Brigadier General Godwin Alabi-Sama. It says here, what I did not understand as an army officer was how on earth Biafran troops got to Sapele and Warri. What would they have been looking for there? What tactics or strategy was that? One would have thought that the Biafrans had an aim and a plan to achieve it. To my mind, if I were in the Biafran High Command and Lagos was my objective, what would be my aim? Biafran entry into the Midwest was, to my mind, a military blunder. There were better objectives than Benin and Lagos. What about Benue? The Benue River would have given Biafra a very good line of defense to the north. The Biafrans depended on the Midwest Igbo officers, who in the end were not helpful to their cause. A traitor is always a traitor, and what you compromise to get, in the end, you lose. Some of the Midwest senior officers that sold out and went to join Biafra were Lieutenant Colonels Conrad Wanwo, Okwechime, Ben Wanje, Igboba, Ochie, and the worst of them all, Captain Joe Isichie. All these officers had appointments in Biafra. Some even commanded Biafran troops in battle. These officers had their parents and families at Asaba and their hometowns in the Midwest, but they were fighting for Biafra across the Niger, where most of them were later relieved of their duties in Biafra as saboteurs, including Ben Iwaje at the Owerri front. The man called Achuzia, a civilian Midwesterner, fought for Biafra, as did Lieutenant Colonel Mora, who became the paymaster in Biafra. How could Biafra have won such a war? As soon as the firing was too heavy to bear, They thought of Mama and Papa back in the peaceful Midwest. Then they ran away. Most were losers. Let us for once imagine that Biafra became a reality. What part of Biafra would they have belonged to? What would have happened to their children in the future? People say everywhere you turn, just like what Larry Njoku said, people just began to run like a pack of monkeys. I didn't say that. Believe me, I didn't say that. Njoku said it. And he must be right since he was there. They got into the Midwest, invaded the Midwest, and then came into the West. That was actually what got Papa from sitting on the fence, from the Western region, from sitting on the fence to moving to the other side. Before then, we had reached out to Victor Banjo to come back home after he was released by Ojukwu. But then he didn't come. He said he was busy with Biafran army. And then much later, I wrote a letter that was going to come after invading the Midwest. Your Bible told him, don't worry about coming. So Baba gave a speech on 12th August, I think it was 12th August 1967, where he talked about how, nobody, regardless of the ethnicity, is allowed to bring any foreign army into Yoruba land. It was on June 12, 1967 that Papa joined the government, but it didn't move fully in terms of supporting the war until August when he gave the speech in Ibadan. That speech you will find in the book by Odugowa. The book is called Chief Obafemi Awolowo, The Political Moses. By the way, this man asked a question, Alabi Sama, like what were they thinking when they went to the Midwest? I want to read to you what Ojukwu was thinking when they went to the Midwest. And where do we find it? We find it in the book by Chinua Achebe. The book is called There Was a Country. All right, so this is Ojukwu talking because he thinks he's talking to clowns. Why do people talk like the people listen to them are stupid? Anyway, let me read what he says, or what he said. Our motive was not territorial ambition or the desire of conquest. We went into the Midwest, later declared the Republic of Benin, purely in an effort to seize the serpent by the head. Every other activity in that republic was subordinated to that single aim. We were going to Lagos to seize the villa in Gowon, and we took necessary military precautions. This is rubbish. This doesn't even make sense. It's not about going to take Gowon. You know why? Because if it was about going to take Gowon, why did you stay in the Midwest? Why did you liberate the Midwest? I don't even know the definition of liberation concept, but why did you declare it to be an independent territory? Why did you appoint the administrator of that space that you're not planning to conquer or you don't have territorial ambition? Why did you move people from the east to work in the Midwest in the midst of all of this if you had no territorial ambition? And this is why I say I don't mind reading books from the South. I'm even expecting like 3 this weekend. I don't mind reading books from the South, but I think for the most part they don't rate the readers, and it's an insult to me. Like I'm reading your book and I feel like you think I'm stupid. Like just like, okay, what exactly do you think you're doing here? You are saying here, by the way, this is written by a very respected person, Chinua Achebe. You're saying you're not trying to conquer anywhere. It's not territorial ambition, but they enter places in this book. There were serious issues between Ojukwu and Banjo as to who should be named governor. Banjo was supposed to, I'm trying to establish something. The idea that, say, the guy is trying to, they don't have any plan to do anything in the Midwest. They just go into Lagos. So you will judge it for yourself if they were just going to Lagos or if they actually had plans for that space. There were serious issues between Ojukwu and Banjo as to who should be named governor. Banjo was supposed to choose the governor of Midwest, but Ojukwu rejected that idea completely. Ojukwu had been advised by his senior Igbo officers to take power out of Banjo's hands. After all, the soldiers and ammunition were from Biafra. On realizing the dangerous situation, Banjo kept his cool and advised Ojukwu that they should pick the governor amongst the non-Igbo Midwesterners and not Colonel Nwawo, an Igbo officer that Ojukwu had in mind. Who is Colonel Nwawo? Is the one that both Oyilawa and Godwin Labi Sama have described as essentially a traitor who worked for Biafra, although he was in the Midwest. He's Igbo, by the way, and it was Ojukwu's original choice. So Banjo says, don't choose him. Instead, he suggested it should be either Lieutenant Colonel David Ejo or Samuel Ogbemudia, or even Colonel Chimnell, who were non-Igbo Midwesterners. However, Ojukwu demurred as he preferred an Igbo officer to be the governor. However, Ojukwu later changed his mind and proceeded to declare Albert Okonkwo, an Igbo Midwesterner, as the governor of Midwest, or Republic of Benin, as Ojukwu preferred to name it. Ojukwu did not recognize Banjo as a partner anymore. The success of Banjo was seen by him as his wisdom, and that he had just used Banjo to achieve his aims. That's what happens to you if you're just fighting the battle. Okonkwo's name as governor was announced on 17th August 1967. Ojukwu was quick to declare the Midwest Republic of Benin, and so on the face of it, it should be taken that the entire Midwest would not be part of Biafra, as that was the original plan between him and Banjo. But this was just a decoy from Ojukwu, as he had it in mind to merge the Midwest with Biafra at a later date. When you read Achebe's book, do you get this kind of idea? The answer is no. Why? Because Achebe had an agenda. Achebe literally worked for Biafra. And this is why I say I don't know what they thought they were doing, destroying people's minds with half-truths and full-blown lies, and just saying things that young people now believe, and everybody thinks somebody hates you. You were literally going into people's territories and naming their kings or naming their governors and ensuring that the person who became governor was from your own ethnic group in that region. Even when, just like it happened in 63, you are still the minority. So two things, how did they happen? That is very simple. How did Osadebe become premier? Through NCNC. So you have to remember that when the old agitation for we want Midwest, when it started, it was 1952, right? There was a meeting that held, this is not today's topic, but I just want to mention it. There was just answer your question very briefly. A meeting held in Ibadan, right? And there were 27 representatives from the Midwest. That's from the Delta province and, the Benin area. There were 27. 6 of them were in Action Group. 21 of them were in NCNC. So NCNC already owned much of the seats, or most of the seats in parliament in the Midwest. Right? Now that they wanted to have their own space, because of course about Benin, something happened. And what happened, to be honest, you think about it and you're like, is this all that happened really? But it's in the Willings Commission report of 1958. Let me tell you what happened. 1952, it was in Ibadan. Governor Macaulay was seated, Lieutenant Governor at the time, was seated. Delake was giving a speech. And then he said, and I quote, "On my right is the Ooni of Ife. On my left is the leader of government business. The voice of the West is complete." That was all he said. And that was where the wahala started. That's why I said majority of what you see coming from that side is mostly on inferiority complex. Anyway, people like Osage, the rest of the lot of them started writing all kinds of things. So they said they wanted to have their own region. Oba of Benin now started working with NCNC because NCNC already had the majority in the region. Like I said, they had 21 of the 27 seats. So in the Western region, it was Action Group, right? But in those provinces, what we had was the vast majority of those were NCNC. But even then, Action Group was still doing what they're supposed to do in those areas. But you see, they didn't know what they had. So everybody was fighting for something. And in the beginning, Action Group was alerting the minorities to the possible dominance of Benin. But before everything was, concluded, they changed their mind and said, listen, Benin is not even who you should be afraid of right now. Because Benin was the big one. Of course, they were added Sako and Ishan to become very big. So there were over 600,000 people at the time, compared to the Igbos, who were less than half of that number. And so they were like, watch out for these guys. So later on, they were like, you guys should actually watch out for the minority Igbos, because they're going to use the NCNC platform to actually get what they wanted. So to answer your question, the way they got it in 63 was to use NCNC. The way they got it in 67 was to use the guns, the barrel of guns. So if the military administrator or the military head of Biafra says to you, it is Albert Okonkwo, who are you to say no? They might just get you out of the way. So that's how Okonkwo became. For a person, for a Ojukwu who had no plan, no territorial ambition, no plan to occupy anywhere, no plan to conquer any place, to now be the one appointing somebody to become the governor and to ensure that that person was from his ethnic group, it tells you that now lie, these people, they lie. With all due respect to the dead, but the dead lied. Where will we? Group. It tells you that now lie, these people, they lie. With all due respect to the dead, but the dead lied. Where will we?
But let's speak to what really happened to.
All right. Thank you very much. I was trying to play you another video. I think we're just going to switch gears for a bit. So if you'll allow me, I'll change this to something else. We'll come back to the Midwest, but I want us to quickly visit the COR. COR will be Akwa Ibom, Cross River, and River State. Sorry, Cross River, Akwa Ibom, Bayelsa, and River State. That's the Calabar Goja province. Calabar, Goja, and Rivers provinces. Please give me a second. If you're on TikTok, I'll be back in a jiffy. Okay. 1 second though. So we're going to come back to this, even the Midwest stuff. We're going to go into some other things I did not talk about before. But I see some things in the comment section. Perhaps I should even pause a bit. Please, if you're on TikTok, sorry, if you're on YouTube, please, I need you to like the live stream. Liking the live stream actually has a way of getting the live out there. So also, if you're on TikTok, thank you very much for being here. So like I said earlier, I'm on Twitter as well. I'm glad you're here. Please let's share the live. So like I said earlier, we're trying to revisit the events of August 1967 with the invasion of the Midwest. And today we just listened to how the Midwest was invaded by Biafra. And in case you were not here when we started, you know what? I think I should play something. Maybe I should play the beginning of the very first tape we listened to, the first video. Again, these videos are on YouTube, on Busui Ori's channel, YouTube channel. So please, if you want to listen to more of it, by the way, you just listen to about 2 videos. So you just listen 3 videos. That's what we just listened to. The Forgotten Invasion, when Biafra hit the Midwest. We also listened to Republic of Benin, how Midwest Igbos helped Biafra invade. And then the last one was the Midwest move that exposed Ojuku's game. But because some people just came in, I think we should just play part of the very first video. And then once we're done with that, we'll go into other stuff, including what happened in the COR. The other videos would be the other side of Biafra, what Biafra did to the indigenes of Cross River, Akwa Ibom, Bayelsa, and River States. And then we'll now maybe even just do, ethnic cleansing. Hey, Oyinbo, ethnic cleansing in Eastern Nigeria. I might add that if there's time. All right, so let's just go back to this. And by the way, if you're on Twitter, I apologize for the issue we had in the beginning. I'm still not very satisfied with the sound quality, but I think it's good enough. It's better than when we started. I had to change some of the equipment, but I hope it's better now. Well, I think it's better now from here because I have another device to monitor it. But if you have any issues with the sound quality, please feel free to write in the comment section, and then I'll see what we can do to make it even better. All right, so let's revisit the very first video, and then we'll go on from there. We're going to bring people up to talk on this later. So if you're, if you want to be part of the conversation one way or another, just hold on for a bit. We're going to bring you up very, very soon. Okay, I found the video. So take a look. Let's start again. I mean, the very first video, listen to part of it. I will move to the COR. Take a listen to this. YouTube adverts. So listen to that play. All right, thank you very much for being here. So we've listened to that video before. I just wanted us to hear it again because I needed to create that context because a lot of people came in much later. All right, so we're going to switch gears. There are a couple more videos to watch, and then we'll bring people up. Someone on YouTube, Kubu, thank you for. It's good to have you here, and thanks for the comment. So you say here, Ojuku's real objective was the complete subjugation of southern Nigeria by any means, right or wrong. That is absolutely correct. And we're going to talk about this in detail much later, but let me quickly say something here. So when you look at the letter that Ojukwu wrote to Victor Banjo, and you find a letter in the book, Breaking the Silence actually, that's the title of the book, Break in the Silence by Adeton Ogunsheye, you find the letter that Ojukwu wrote to Victor Banjo, and what he really wanted was to own the entire space. He wanted the Midwest, and he got the Midwest, by the way. And a lot of times people will tell you that, oh, we're just going through the Midwest because we're going to Lagos. That is not true. It is not true. They were not just going through the Midwest, they were occupying the Midwest. One of the things they did in the Midwest, apart from, I mean, we didn't play all the videos and everything, but I might just add some of the other details that, are not included in the video we just listened to. There's a case, for instance, where they had concentration camps in Benin, how people were dealt with in Ugedi, in Wari, in Sapele, the Hausas, the Yorubas at the Osiomo River, the lepers colony, the Benin people, all kinds of things that they did. But beyond all of that was that not only did they appoint the governor, who had to be an Igbo person, he also determined that whatever they were making in that place. Sorry, can you hear me on TikTok? I just want to be sure. Can you hear me on TikTok? I'm noticing something. Okay, okay, good. All right. That whatever money they made in the Midwest, they had to remit a particular percentage of it to Enugu, right? Ensuring that some of the civil servants from Enugu were also sent to Benin to become senior civil servants. So they were not just going through the Midwest to get to Lagos. They were expanding their territory. Because there's no way you're not expanding territory and ensuring that it was only somebody from the ethnic group that was the governor of the region, contrary to what the person who actually took the place to, advised you. Because at the time, and I think I mentioned it in the video, there were three options. There was Ogbemudia, there was David Ejo, and then there was Chimnel. Ogbemudia was Benin, Ejo was Urobo, and Chimnel was the Shekiri. But you see, Ojukwu wanted to make sure that it was his own person that was there. So from the very beginning, everything was about that ethnic group. Even the idea of taking the eastern region itself, it was about his ethnic group. It wasn't about the minorities. That's why, and you're going to listen to it in the next video we're about to listen to, what those people went through. You would never get it on, or you never understand why people from Rivers, people from Akwa Ibom, the way they sound, especially Rivers, the way they sound on this matter, you won't get it until you actually understand what they went through. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to play 2 sets of videos. One is shorter, right? It's just about 10 minutes long, and then the other one is longer. The shorter one is called What Biafra Did to Indigenes of COR. That's Calabar, Akwa State today, Rivers and Bayelsa. Then after that one, we'll then listen to another video. Watch another. Well, you listen to the audio. I'll be watching the video here. This one is titled. That one is titled "Ethnic Cleansing in Eastern Nigeria." You put those 2 things together, and you have a better understanding of what happened. This is not to say some people are bad or some people are terrible. It's just to say that just as they can tell their story of what happened to them, even though many of what they say na lie, they full up. And I'm not saying nothing bad happened in the Eastern region. Of course, terrible things happened, and people also were unalived, and that. But the thing is that we've talked about that for many years. There's gone to a point where it appears that that's the only thing that happened, and that's wrong. It's not the only. I mean, it's a valid, reason to have compassion and on the people from the south. You should. I mean, if you're a normal human being, would have that compassion regardless. However, we also have to be very careful not to get carried away by this single story of, it's also only these people that were hurt and things like that. So we're going to switch gears for a second, and then we'll listen to 1 second, Lumumbo. All right, so we'll listen to, let me change this picture to something in line with that particular, okay, perfect. So I'm going to listen to something on what happened to the guys in Cross River, Akwa Ibom, Rivers and Bayelsa. And then after this, I'll play the other video. So take a listen to this. For the folks on Twitter, I'm going to have to switch your audio source for a second, but you're going to enjoy this one a bit better than what happened earlier. Thank you for your understanding. On ball. All right, this is good. So let's have this one. Take a listen, everyone. Sorry. By the way, please let's power tap and share and like everything we do. Whether I know my face is not showing like that, but please, we have to keep the live going. So if you're on TikTok, please power tap. If you're on YouTube, please like the live, share the live. We're going to have a detailed conversation on this much later. So if you have something to say, you have the opportunity to come up and share with us in a bit. But for now, let's watch. I keep saying watch. Let's listen to this video. All right. At the recent Kampala peace talks, Dr. B.J. Nkeme from Calabar, a retired senior medical officer in the employment of the former Eastern Nigerian government, who is well known to the other side, gave a resume of rebel atrocities in the southeastern states in the following words. Again, southeastern states is not southeastern region. Southeastern states is Cross River and Akwa Ibom state today. So what did Dr. Nkeme say? It was clear to all right-thinking people that these people, the minorities, wanted to remain within the Federation of Nigeria, but with states of their own in which they enjoyed the right of self-determination. This did not suit the Igbos for the newly declared Republic of Biafra, and so they were determined either to force the 5 million non-Igbos into their republic or to exterminate them systematically. To this end, Igbo soldiers were quickly sent to all non-Igbo areas with instructions to keep down the people, detain or even kill all who dared raise a voice in protest against the idea of Biafra. The provincial secretary for Calabar, an Igbo man, called a mass meeting in July. Sorry, I'll take that again. The provincial secretary for Calabar, an Igbo man, called a mass meeting in June 1967 and addressed the Calabar people thus, and I quote, "You Calabar people say you want a state of your own.
Let me tell you that by the time the federal troops come here to enforce this mad idea, there will be no one left but grass and weeds. For we shall have flattened your land and killed all you Efiks. From then on, the non-Igbos of the eastern region were subjected to torture, detention, all forms of human indignities, and even killing. In Asang, a town in Enyon division, where I come from, and which is just a mile from Okpo, my own village, all the inhabitants, numbering about 400, were carried away to an unknown destination. 2 women, one a relation of mine who had been bedridden for 2 years, were slaughtered in cold blood because the soldiers said it would be a burden to carry them along, and they were under instructions not to leave alive any person in the town. On the way out, a woman gave birth to a babe, Ade, and was groaning in her travail. The soldiers bundled her out of the canoe which was taking them away, shot both mother and the innocent child, only a few minutes old. In Atan Onoyo, another town in Enoin division, the whole town was burnt down together with all the people the Igbo soldiers could lay hands on. An uncle of mine was killed together with his wife and 4 or 5 children. The only surviving child is a girl of 10 years, a right arm severed, who now lives to tell the tale of how they were all lined up by the riverbank and shot. Luckily for her, she did not die and is being cared for by me now. In Ikorekpanyo, 3 miles from my hometown, the Igbo soldiers rang the church bell one Sunday afternoon and forced everybody in the village at gunpoint to assemble in the church building for a special prayer for the survival of the so-called Biafra. When all were assembled, the Igbo soldiers surrounded the church, set it on fire, burning down the villagers and shooting those who tried to escape. It is estimated that more than 300 men, women, and children were massacred in and around that church that day. At Ikoropot, 2 wells were filled with the bodies of men, women, and children, all thrown in there by Igbo soldiers to die. In Idro, a village 4 miles from my village, the men folk were forced to dig 3 large pits, each 7 feet deep. All the men and women were tied hand and foot and thrown into them. Children were dumped in with their parents. 5 men were to cover each pit with earth. When this task was done, the men were themselves all shot dead, and their bodies placed on the mounds. I saw these bodies and the mounds myself when I arrived there 3 days after the gruesome and inhuman incident. On the day federal troops landed in Calabar, that was 18th October 1967, there were 169 civilians in detention by so-called Biafran soldiers in the Calabar Army Barracks. They were all lined up, 169 civilians. They were all lined up and shot dead by Igbo soldiers. Those dead include Mr. Efyong Spats, ex-member for Calabar in the Nigerian Parliament, and Mr. Ekmayong, a senior lecturer in Nsukka University, well known to Professor Njoku. Even as I speak, these acts of genocide are still being carried out by the Igbos in minority areas still under their occupation. When they were being chased out of Port Harcourt, the so-called Biafra soldiers killed off almost all the rivers people they could lay hand on. In accordance with instruction from their high command, the killings continue now in the riverine areas not yet under federal control. Recently, 200 Ibibio men and women who had been under detention in Umuahia were taken out to face a mob who brutally murdered them in cold blood outside the Progress Hotel. There are many other gruesome incidents of children and pregnant mothers killed in the marketplaces by Igbo soldiers, of houses and property of non-Igbos wantonly destroyed. I'm going to read something similar from Elechi Amadi. This one happened that one I just read happened in the Calabar Goja province, that's the southeastern state. This one I'm about to read happened in Rivers State. On the night of Tuesday, 2nd April 1968, there was prolonged rifle fire not far from the village. Although Port Harcourt was now being encircled by federal troops, I did not think they could be anywhere near my village at that time. Still, the intermittent shooting disturbed me. The next morning, we were told that some federal soldiers had been killed in a skirmish. There was to be a general combing to ensure that no enemy soldiers were hiding anywhere. Villagers were urged to go and have a look at the slain enemy soldiers so that they would realize that the victories claimed over the radio were not mere propaganda. Joining the considerable stream of sightseers, I reached a large pit into which waste crude oil from an oil well had been diverted. Floating on the oil were many bloated bodies, turned face downwards. Blood was still oozing out from bullet holes in some of them. None of the dead wore any uniform. They were dressed in singlets, shirts, and wrappers. The ground around the pit was beaten down, much like a recently used wrestling arena. The sides of the pit bore the marks of hands and feet that had vainly tried to claw their way out. For a while I gazed tongue-tied at the sickening sight. Then I began to count the bodies. I stopped at 160 and guessed that there must have been at least 200 bodies. Who were these men who went to war in wrappers? The next day, the secessionist radio announced that a waterborne attack on Port Harcourt had been repulsed and that the enemy had suffered heavy casualties. Then the truth came out. The victims were in fact natives of a riverine village. Let me read the one near Alu. That's where Elechamaji is from. On the night of Tuesday, 2nd April 1968, there was prolonged rifle fire not far from the village. Although Port Harcourt was now being encircled by federal troops, I did not think they could be anywhere near my village at that time. Still, the intermittent shooting disturbed me. The next morning, we were told that some federal soldiers had been killed in a skirmish. There was to be a general combing to ensure that no enemy soldiers were hiding anywhere. Villagers were urged to go and have a look at the slain enemy soldiers so that they would realize that the victories claimed over the radio were not mere propaganda. Joining the considerable stream of sightseers, I reached a large pit into which waste crude oil from an oil well had been diverted. Floating on the oil were many bloated bodies, turned face downwards. Blood was still oozing out from bullet holes in some of them. None of the dead wore any uniform. They were dressed in singlets, shirts, and wrappers. The ground around the pit was beaten down, much like a recently used wrestling arena. The sides of the pit bore the marks of hands and feet that had vainly tried to claw their way out. For a while I gazed tongue-tied at the sickening sight. Then I began to count the bodies. I stopped at 160 and guessed that there must have been at least 200 bodies. Who were these men who went to war in wrappers? The next day, the secessionist radio announced that a waterborne attack on Port Harcourt had been repulsed and that the enemy had suffered heavy casualties. Then the truth came out. The victims were in fact natives of a riverine village. They had been carted away and slain 30 miles from their home on the pretext that they were aiding the enemy. The message was clear. No one was safe. Anyone not in sympathy with the rebel cause could be carried away, shot in cold blood, and labeled a federal soldier. The book is Sunset in Biafra by Elechamaji. Now we're going to the other book.
Unhealthy oils. Freeze.
This. The so-called Biafra of the rebels is not a homogeneous tribal state. As I have said, 5 out of its 12 million inhabitants are not Igbos. They are Ibibios, Efiks, Ekois, and Ijos. Rebel leaders. All right, back to this. The so-called Biafra of the rebels is not a homogeneous tribal state. As I have said, 5 out of its 12 million inhabitants are not Igbos. They are Ibibios, Efik.
You know what I just realized? Everything I've said, folks on TikTok did not even hear it one bit. No. See, there are many mics and equipment here, so I apologize. So YouTube, TikTok, I was talking to you. I was reading, interesting. I was even reading what somebody wrote on YouTube. Someone wrote, can you believe that even yesterday, IPOP people were saying they would buy, by the way, buy is what is used for unaliving or killing. They'll kill those Ika, Banke, Ukwane, Ndokwa, and take their lands. Let them try, you know. And like I said earlier, I think one of the major issues we have in Nigeria's history is that we don't really discuss it. Therefore, we don't learn from it. Therefore, we're doomed to repeating it. And I hope that we at least learn so that we don't repeat the mistakes, because there's nothing cool about the war. There's nothing cool about what happened. And trust me, it's not just about folks in the Eastern region. I've done series on the war before. Now we're talking our war. We're reading our war. I think after the Awo series, which is probably going to last us another 2 or 3 weeks, because we have been 1 or 2 weeks, sure. So after that one, I think we're going to revisit the war again and just discuss some things that we didn't discuss earlier. We don't do this because we want to demonize an ethnic group, but I think it's important that people actually know what happened, so that way you don't have this mindset that, oh, you're because you take the battle rope in your corner for your jet. Tell the Mogota in your own say, but you don't know what the person did to other people. You are easily bamboozled. You'll be easily blackmailed and manipulated, right? Any small thing, you now daole. By the way, I'm code mixing like fire right now. I don't even know which one I'm saying, but I hope you are getting the point. The idea basically is that you are compassionate towards everybody. So if somebody says they suffered, you're compassionate towards, you know, in the other space where they were the aggressors. All right. So let's continue listening to this. So I said earlier, while I was trying to switch, that the other video that has to do with the ethnic cleansing in the Eastern region, I think we can do that on Thursday. But for now, let's listen to what Ojukwu didn't tell you about Eastern minorities. This is one of the videos on the YouTube channel, Busui Ore. So take a listen now, but you can also go back and watch it and get more details. The book, this thing I'm about to play right now, the book that I'm referring to is Anthony Nauro's speech in 1968 August at Addis Ababa. So everything you hear me read right now, that's Anthony Nauro speaking. I'm only just reading it out. All right. So take a listen to this, and hopefully this helps us also understand the situation a bit better. Thank you. And again, please share the live, like the live, TikTok, Twitter, YouTube. Like it. I really need folks on YouTube to like the live stream. All right, this helps the algorithm get it out to other people. Thanks a lot. So let's continue listening to this.
The so-called Biafra of the rebels is not a homogeneous tribal state. As I have said, 5 out of its 12 million inhabitants are not Igbos. They are Ibibios, Efiks, Ekois, and Ijos. Rebel leaders argue that they all support Biafra. Then why the mass intimidation and brutality conducted by the Ojukwu regime against them, all to no avail? At the recent Kampala peace talks, Dr. B.J. Nkeme from Calabar, a retired senior medical officer in the employment of the former Eastern Nigerian government, who is well known to the other side, gave a resume of rebel atrocities in the southeastern states in the following words. Please adjust your seats. We're about to adjust your seat belts. We're about to go on a very, very fantastic ride. But before we go on that ride, let me quickly say this. Southeastern state is not southeastern region. I know I say it every time. It's because new people come in and they may not have heard me say it before. Southeastern states.
I borrowed 300,000 naira. I need to pay back.
One of the things that I thought I should put out there, I've said it before, but I want to say it again. The reason we're talking about the Igbos first, is about the Asaba first, is that there's a mistake I think we make as far as history is concerned. Whilst it's true that Igbos are not the owners of everywhere, it's also true that they exist in spaces other than the southeastern part of Nigeria. And it doesn't hurt to acknowledge that. So when we talk about what the minorities went through, the Igbos in the Midwest were minorities, but they suffered at the hands of the Nigerian forces. And that's why we spend time to talk about them. But going forward, we're going to be switching gears. We're talking about what happened in the hands of, what happened to the minorities in the hands of the Igbos. I'm going to start with a document from the UK Parliament. That's from the House of Commons. This is a parliamentary record from the UK Answered, dated August 27, 1968. I should like to correct a myth about Eastern Nigeria. Speeches have been made by Colonel Ojukwu at Addis Ababa in which mention is made of 14 million Igbos. One does not need to have been a historian at Oxford to know that this is not a fact. When one goes to Calabar, Port Harcourt and elsewhere, one finds there are in the southeast states and river states at least 4 million, some say 4.5 to 5 million non-Igbo people who have suffered in the past as a minority in the east under an Igbo-administered eastern capital at Enugu, similarly as the Igbos suffered in the north in 1966 under a northern Muslim-dominated capital at Kaduna. I'm going to read that slowly and break it down for us. Ojukwu went to Addis Ababa to talk about the plight of 40 million Igbos. Number one, he lied. There is nothing like 14 million Igbos in 1967. That's not true. That's one thing. The entire region, when you count every other group together, they were still not up to 14 million, let alone just Igbo people alone. When the Constitutional Conference in Lagos adjourned for 2 weeks, the Eastern delegate refused to return to continue the discussions. Meanwhile, the Eastern Radio continued its campaign, inflaming the passions of the citizens of the Eastern region against the rest of Nigeria. By threats and tricks, Igbos outside the East were invited into returning home. All this could not but increase tension. Then some elements in the Eastern region embarked on widespread organized killings of the people of Northern origin resident in the East. News of this was first broadcast by foreign radios. In these terrible circumstances, riots erupted in the north, in which about 5,000 people lost their lives. A majority of those killed were Igbos, but many others were police personnel and Northerners. These tragic and regrettable killings have since been grossly exploited by Mr. Ojukwu to compel the Igbos in the East to rebel and take up arms against their country. So what you have here was that, yes, people were unalived, but the numbers were put at 5,000. However, much later in that same year of 1966, there was a pamphlet that was published by the Eastern region that put the numbers at 8,000. This was October 3, 1966. It mentioned that 5,000 people lost their lives in the north. Now again, 5 people, too many. So 5,000 is a lot, but it's also not 30,000. So 5,000 people lost their lives in the north. The East published their own pamphlet and said it was 8,000. News of this was first broadcast by foreign radios. In these terrible circumstances, riots erupted in the north, in which about 5,000 people lost their lives. A majority of those killed were Igbos, but many others were police personnel and Northerners. These tragic and regrettable killings have since been grossly exploited by Mr. Ojukwu to compel the Igbos in the East to rebel and take up arms against their country. But it is important to understand the facts. In his impromptu address to the ad hoc Constitutional Conference on October 1966, General Gowon reacted to the October tragedy in the following words: "Certainly there has been a damage. I think that is what we have never seemed to admit when there is something like that. sorry about it. I regret it, and I am doing everything I can. Mr. Ojukwu himself at the Aburi conference in January 1967 put the number of those killed in the Northern riots at 10,000 and insisted then that he had foolproof evidence to support his claim. When it suited his plans later, he raised the figure to 30,000. Accused the federal government of organizing the killings of Igbos and distributed many malicious publications on the alleged pogrom. It was 5,000 from international observers, and federal government agreed on 5,000. Like 5,000 people died, estimates. But Ojukwu said it was 8,000, sorry, it was 8,000 in the publication of the Eastern region in the same 1966. By January of 1967, Ojukwu said there were 10,000. By May of 1967, Ojukwu said there were 30,000. By the Ahira Declaration, Ojukwu said there were 50,000. The figures kept changing, and
the journey to perfection continues. Edge of shading.
This book again is called Ojukwu's Rebellion and World Opinion. I sent this book to a friend who sorry, that was a YouTube ad, and I think we should just, you know what, let's do something, right? I know time to love, but let's do something. This ethnic cleansing in Eastern Nigeria, there are 3 parts. Part 1 is 10 minutes, part 2 is 23 minutes, and then part 3 is about 8 minutes. So let's listen to part 1. We'll continue on Thursday, but we'll be here again tomorrow. Tomorrow we're having a full session from 1 till evening, 7:30 thereabout. So that will be tomorrow. And then tomorrow we're going to continue our series, Awolowo, but tomorrow is Awolowo, Azikiwe, and Cultural Union. So that'll be we want to do an Igbo State Union. That's what we're discussing tomorrow. But let's just listen to part 1 of this one, because we won't be able to finish everything, but just listen to part 1. We'll continue much later. So take a listen to this one, and then we'll bring people up. You can share your thoughts, and then we'll call it a day. Thank you very much. This book again is called Ojukwu's Rebellion and World Opinion. I sent this book to a friend who said I hated Igbos. I sent it to her months ago. She has not said a word since then, and I hope at some point maybe she read the book. When you read this book, amongst of course other books, you'll understand the fact that the Igbos had no business suffering like they did, and it's such a sad thing that happened. So back to this. Nebugram Douglas, Ojukwu's Rebellion and World Opinion. It has been nearly 2 years since my resignation. This, by the way, is this book was published in 1968. It says here, it has been nearly 2 years since my resignation. In the intervening period, we have witnessed the bold step consisting in the announcement of the birth of the Republic of Biafra, and we have all been plagued by the horrors of an avoidable civil war, in the throes of which we still are. How it will end, I cannot say, but if I were to base any prediction on the present trend, I would boldly claim that I have been vindicated both as to the futility of the gamble and as to my decision not to be party to such ignominy. After my resignation, I was forced into virtual retirement in my hometown, and from there I watched with apprehension the fast deteriorating national situation, and in course of time the outbreak of hostilities. And I lived there in those dark days of tyranny, of which all the inhabitants of the minority areas of the former Eastern Nigeria have had ample cause to complain. As much as possible detached from involvement in the raging conflict, for having already been a boogeyman of the Igbos and the object of a vilification and hate, I thought that passiveness was my best policy, but I would not be left alone. On February 24, 1968, pursuant to an address delivered by a civil commissioner in the government of Biafra to the people of Port Harcourt, and to a plan for the systematic extermination of all the notable peoples of rivers and southeastern states origin in and around Port Harcourt, drawn up by some well-known Igbo professionals and businessmen. As a first step, the buildings and other properties of some 12 rivers people and one southeasterner in Port Harcourt were destroyed. Again, like I like to say, when you see the word southeasterner here, he's not talking about southeast region. He's talking about southeast as a state. Southeast state is different from southeast region. Southeast state is present-day Cross River and Akwa Ibom state. So when the states were created on May 27, 1967, the North was broken into the North was broken into 6. The West, which had been broken into 2 in 1963, was further broken into 2 again in 1967. So we now had Western states, Lagos state, and Midwest. And then the East was also broken into 3. We had East Central states, which is present the Southeastern region. We had Southeastern states, which is present the Akwa Ibom and Cross River states. And then we have River State, which is present the River State and parts of Bayelsa state. So when it says here that they went to destroy buildings belong to one southeasterner, he's not talking about an Igbo man. He's talking about someone from Efik, Ibibio, that side. All right. Having said that, let's go back to this. So he says, the buildings and other properties of some 12 rivers people and one southeasterner in Port Harcourt were destroyed by mobs of Igbo demonstrators, in most cases by burning. As might be expected, mine led the rest. 2 of my buildings, one of them my residence in the city, with all their contents, including my entire law library, office equipment, a variety of documents, furniture, a model car, and various items of personal chattels were destroyed. The reason, every riversman or southeasterner was ipso facto a saboteur, and yet we were all supposed to be fellow Biafrans. Then on the following day, I was arrested at Abonema and taken to Port Harcourt, to which in the first instance my movements were thereupon restricted. Then subsequently I was detained in what had become an army camp. To be a prisoner, if only for a day, is not a pleasant experience. And in circumstances in which one's crime is that one belongs to some ethnic group rather than to another, in which for the time being power is vested, is exasperating. But in this case, I was not unduly agitated by my discomfiture, because out of the certain adversity arose for me the opportunity of meeting Ojukwu once again, of saying to him something just short of taunting him with the fact that my prediction as to the probable outcome of his rebellion had been justified, of confronting him with the atrocities being perpetrated daily upon defenseless riversmen and women everywhere by soldiers and other agents, and of learning at first hand his current strategy for sustaining the rebellion now that the original sources of hope and victory had betrayed him. What does all of that mean? Essentially what he's saying is that he was, after they've burned down his buildings, they arrested him and detained him in an army camp, and he was looking forward to meeting Ojukwu. So we talked about this yesterday, that eventually had a meeting with Ojukwu on April 3rd, 1968 at Umuahia. And when they got there, His Excellency, that's Ojukwu, His Excellency appeared to welcome the opportunity of seeing me again, and after acknowledging the obvious fact that the Rivers people were not behind his rebellion, that is in these words, quote, "I know that I have not been accepted by the Rivers people. I know that I have not made my influence really felt in that area. This is important," end quote. This is important because whenever people say things, especially if you're from the South, let me put it this way, the only tool in the arsenal of some people in Nigeria is propaganda. And like I said, if you have been here for a while and listened to me for a while, it didn't start today. It started in the 1930s. The idea of using propaganda to drive a narrative started first with Dr. Nnamdi Azikiwe. And how do I know that? Because I read excerpts and news items from the West African Parlor that was published in 1937, 1938, 39, 1940, 41, 42, up until 49. There are bits and pieces that you can just put together. And you can read, you can tell the direction of, his thought process. And that's why I never for once have this delusion that it was Zik of Africa or like it was Pan-Africanist. That is not true. Unless, of course, we're just talking. If we're just talking, anything can be true. For instance, you can tell me you can swallow an elephant just at a go. If you just talk, it's okay. But if we're talking about reality, that's a totally different matter. And so, Papa said something about Zik, for instance, in his book. The book is called Awo, the autobiography of Chief Obafemi Awolowo. He said something, he said, that Zeke was the first consummate propagandist in Nigeria. I believe that to be true, having read some things from Zeke, and also having read about him from other people. And I'm not saying he was a bad man, I'm just saying that this idea of using propaganda started with him as far as the Southeast is concerned, which is what we still see till today. Why am I saying all of this? Because when we have conversations about the war, and I mean, again, terrible event, people died, regardless of who they were or whatever tribe they belong to, or whatever ethnic group they belong to, nobody should have to die for that, which is one of the pains that I have about the war, because it was a needless war. But you see, whenever people talk about the war, you have folks saying things like, we still want Biafra because even folks in the South were part of it and they wanted it. Well, I'm reading to you a statement by the man himself, Ojukwu, saying that he knew that the Rivers people were not with him. And you will soon see from the other book by Elechi Amadi how those people were seen as saboteurs and they were killed. Not one, two, not in dozens, I'm talking in scores, in hundreds. By the time you get to Akwa Ibom, you see that one as well. Terrible things happen there. Why are we putting this out there? So that the young ones today will not be carried away by the rhetoric of, oh, we are victims, let's fight again. And then they will tell you, oh, you know, your father supported it back then, so you too must support it because that shows that you're a good person. It's a lie. Your fathers did not support it. I'm saying it not because I hate any group, but because that's the truth. And the person who was fighting all over the place himself admitted that the Rivers people did not support it. And they will tell you something like, oh, Philip Effiong was the one that led the army. It's tokenism. It's this thing where they say, oh, because there's one person that did this from your place, that means that your entire ethnic group supported it. And so, for instance, I've heard someone say something the other day, say, can you tell us the ethnic groups that supported Biafra? The point is not really about ethnic groups, it's about individuals, right? And if individuals supported something, it doesn't mean that the ethnic group as a whole supported it, especially when you know the history behind the whole idea of Eastern Consultative Forum. It's something that a lot of people talk about, oh, Eastern Consultative Forum, you know, people just did this, just supported it from everywhere. It's a lie. It's a rubber stamp assembly that was created to essentially, you know, just say yes to everything Ojukwu and his minions, you know, were about at the time. And we're saying this so that we don't have another generation fall into that trap of saying people supported it. This is Ojukwu saying, I know. I'm going to read one more time. It says here, I know that I have not been accepted by the Rivers people. I know that I have not made my influence really felt in that area. When was this? This was April 3rd, 1968. It's about 1 year since the war started, or since he declared Biafra.
Millions of people invest in stock.
All right. Thank you very much for listening. That was a lot. Anyway, let me repeat what I said in that video. None of this thing is down to demonize an ethnic group or say, oh, certain people are bad, they're just terrible people. It's just to let you know what happened in history, so that at least you have an understanding of the past. We learn from it, that we don't repeat the mistakes. Number two, you're also armed with the truth, so that people can't just come around you and guilt trip you into doing things that are wrong, or things that maybe not even wrong, they're right by them, but in the long run will hurt you and the country. Because when people, for instance, I've said several times, one of the reasons we have these agitations keep coming up every time from the Southeast, sincerely, I've said it several times, it's not because Southeasterners or Igbo people are bad people, they're not. It's just that if you've been sold a narrative again and again, and that's the only thing you've come to believe, every other person is seen as haters. And so you're looking for a way to birth a dream that never was. And I'll say this, from what I have learned from history, this whole idea of trying to get out of Nigeria the way they were planning to do it is not a dream. It's a nightmare. And no matter how many generations, you know, go on with the delusion, they will always have the nightmare, right? And the point is to say, listen, you did not, I mean, you went through stuff, your parents did, but at some point we have to talk about why you went through it. You went through it because of the actions of certain people, and the primary person, of course, would be Ojukwu. And the person you just listened to, by the way, the book I was reading, we're going to continue from here on Thursday. The book I was reading is by Nebo Graham Douglas. The book is called Ojuku's Rebellion and World Opinion. Now, we don't have, I usually talk about getting books on Redomi Books, but those books are for sale. This particular one, you are not going to be able to get it, even if you want to buy it. But you can get it free of charge on Redomi Global on Telegram. You'll be able to download this book. It's a pamphlet. It's not very voluminous, but it's very rich, and it will open your eyes to the things that folks in River State, especially, and also in other parts of Cross River and Ẹkáàbọ went through in the hands of Biafra. And so that, of course, helps you to put things in perspective, and then you're able to have a better relationship with people and not just get guilt-tripped because of ignorance and naivety. All right, having said that, if anybody would like to contribute to the conversation, please feel free to either type in the comment section or send requests. We'll have a few minutes to talk before we call it a day. We'll be here tomorrow at 1 p.m. We'll be talking about Awolowo, Azikiwe, and the evolution of federalism. Awolowo, Azikiwe, and federalism. And I'll be focusing on the social-cultural groups like Igbo State Union, Igbo Federal Union, and Egbe Mojudua, and the things that happened starting in 1943 especially. All right, that will be tomorrow at 1 p.m. Ife time, West African time. So please join us tomorrow, and that will take us up until 7:30 p.m. and that will be, that will be on Wednesday. Someone on YouTube says Admiral Way, who was Gowon's deputy, was also from Calabar, so that Philip Effiong was Ojuku's deputy was insignificant. Thank you, Kubu, for adding that. So people say that to a lot of young people, not just folks from Ẹkáàbọ. They also say to even Yoruba people, oh, Philip Effiong was Ẹkáàbọ, and therefore he wasn't just Ojuku's idea, it was 100% Ojuku's idea. One of the things is that, so you have a person from a particular place say, oh, the entire place supports us. If the entire place supported you, how come you were killing their people? That means you might have one person from that area working with you for whatever reason, but it doesn't change the fact that the whole idea was to take over what belongs to others. And again, let me say it again, this doesn't mean Igbos are bad people. It's just to tell you that Ojuku was actually covetous and ambitious, and he wasn't doing this for you or your people. It wasn't even because of what happened in the north that Ojuku declared Biafra. Ojuku's idea of Biafra actually started before what happened in the north. Somebody says, can you please tell us how to get a hold of the book again, please? All right, please go on Telegram. Let me do this. I'm going to type the address. Join the Telegram channel. You would find give me a second. I'll type the Telegram address, okay? So once you join the Telegram channel, and resources section, and then you will find that book. 1 second, I'm typing on I don't know if you can see it now. Let's type on Twitter as well. YouTube Mombo. So you can join the channel and also take advantage of some of the materials in the learning resources, Redomi Global. All right, so that's on TikTok. Let's see what we can do for YouTube. Somebody said it's just like saying Uyo. I don't understand that. I'll put it on YouTube as well. Okay, I'll put it on YouTube as well. It's called Ojuku's Rebellion and World Opinion. It's a very small book, but that book is explosive. And please, again, the information is for educational purposes alone. Don't use information to be fighting people and saying everybody is bad. There are bad people everywhere, there are good people everywhere. But I think a particular group in Nigeria has been so indoctrinated with propaganda that, they just, when they speak, what comes out is just propaganda. Not necessarily because they're bad people, but that's what they've been told. And a lot of them attack me, and well, they can't attack me physically, by the way. If they try, they are gone for. But they do it online. And the reason they do it is because they think I'm against them. But the truth of the matter is that if you're an Igbo person, you need this history more than me. But if you're Yoruba or from another place, you also need the history because you need to arm yourself with the truth. Truth is your shield, or else, how come I feel at agenda? Because I was saying something. So for young Igbos, for instance, who hear these things over and over again, the thing that's planted in them is that they are hated and they are not. That they are second-class citizens and they are not. But you see, if you constantly think people hate you, you are going to act in such a way that you are going to make what you thought right. In other words, you're going to, it's like confirmation bias. You're going to confirm what you were thinking. Everything you do will confirm that you are hated, even if you are not hated. So you now do things that will make them hate you, or you also find yourself projecting hate towards them in your relationship with them. Therefore, your relationship becomes terrible. And I think, to be honest, every Nigerian is a bona fide citizen until you act like you're either superior to others or that you're the victim of everybody. But like I said, in the entire history of Nigeria, only one group has been able to perfect this idea. They do it till today, but they don't even know how it started. And I said some days ago that I started in the 1940s, right? I started in the 1940s, and it was something that was cooked up by Zeke. And for all the, Zeke was good in his own way, but one thing that he did that was actually quite interesting was the ability to put together two disparate thoughts of being superior, better than everybody in Nigeria and even in Africa, but at the same time being the victims of everybody. These are two disparate thoughts. He was able to marry them together and then give it to his people, inculcated it in them, and every other person that has come since Zeke has repeated the exact same rhetoric, even until today. That is not Nigeria's fault. That is, something you have to solve on your own. But I hope, a lot of Igbos will hear this and also help other people who probably haven't thought in that direction. But for the rest of us, please, let's be armed with the truth. And that way it's going to be easier for us to have a better nation. This is actually nation building. Contrary to what people think, we're not tearing anything down. Your own. See, if it was your version of truth, it would even make sense. Now, lie, Fulham. Your own lies will not determine what we believe. We're going to believe the truth of the events of the past. All right. So thank you very much for being here. Again, today was a short one, but every weekday we meet here at 1 p.m. Now we've started Twitter, and I think Twitter is also doing well, but normally we'll use TikTok and YouTube, but thank God now Twitter is also one of the platforms. So please join us tomorrow at 1 p.m. Apparently, I don't see any questions. I've read the comments on YouTube, but if anybody has any other comment, please feel free to write it. If nothing like that exists, then we're going to have our anthems and then call it a day. At the end of every session, we play the Nigerian anthem and Yoruba anthem. And yeah, that would be it. Any question? Let's see if we can have anything next 1 minute. Anybody, any question, any comment, anything like that? Going once, going twice. All right, let's call it a day. 1 p.m. tomorrow, 1 p.m. Ife time, West African time. We're going to continue our session on Awolowo and Zeke. So tomorrow is Awolowo, Zeke, and Federalism Part 2. We'll be looking at the evolution of the Federalist, Awo himself, and also what happened when the Egbe Modudua was formed in 1945 in London, and also when it was re-established in Nigeria in 1948. What was the action, or what was the attitude of folks in the eastern region, and also Easterners who were living in Lagos at the time? What did they do? Did they help set it up? Did they work against it? What plans did they have? What was the political repercussion of those things? Did they affect any other person in town? Those things we could discuss tomorrow, 1 p.m. Ife time, West African time. Thank you very much for being part of today's session on YouTube, on TikTok, and on Twitter. Do have a lovely evening. But before we go, Kato Law. So for our folks on YouTube, I'm going to have to let you go so we don't have our copyright strikes. So thank you very much for being here, YouTube folks. I see no questions because all of us Otiyewa. So tomorrow we'll do our normal sessions. Tomorrow's session is not going to end at 3. It will end around 7:30. But it's important to come early because we have a lot to cover. All right. Thank you so much. So YouTube people, see you tomorrow. Have a lovely